Welcome and thanks. Awesome. Welcome and thanks everyone for joining today's session. This is the day 3 of the Marketing Cloud Personalization series. I'm so happy and excited to see you all again in the day 3. And I am sure that you are learning something new in this bootcamp, and this is beneficial to all of you. And I take this opportunity to thank you all for attending, and also to all the speakers. So if you haven't seen the schedule, we have the next sessions also lined up on the dates mentioned. So all these sessions happen at 12 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday and Thursday. We have a few exceptions for the August 15th session. Maybe it will be scheduled at 1 p.m. Eastern. If there's anything, I will let you know ahead of time. So this is the schedule as of now. So today's session is by Michelle. So she's gonna dive us through the solution overview. So before that, I want to cover a few things which we have discussed in the last session, and also something which we haven't covered on the SFTP. And this session will be recorded and will be uploaded to the YouTube channel MC Learning Camp. And we will answer all the questions at the end of the session. If any questions, please post them in the chat window. And any questions that are unanswered or not relevant to today's topic, please feel free to add them to the form that will be addressed, and those questions will be answered on the Ask Me Anything panel. So I will share the link to the form in a few minutes. Well, in the last session, we have looked at the resources, all the resources that are available, where you can check the resources to get started and also to find some further help and some courses. The Partner Learning Camp and eCampus and Salesforce help and the developer documents or must to refer documents. They have all the exhaustive information. And then we looked at the use cases and the Marketing Cloud permission limits, the different types of permissions available, the implementation when you or starting with the implementation, some resources that you can refer to have to get a checklist of all the questions and get some guidance on how to get started on the implementation, the discovery sessions and all. So we also looked at the editions and the ethics that we need to follow when we are using the data. We will be collecting a lot of data. So what are the ethics that we need to follow and the best practices, what to do and what not to do as well. And we have also looked at the different key terminology. So some of the terms that we will be using, maybe the new words that are more specific to the personalization. We have looked at some of the few terms. And then we also looked at the account settings. And Jacob has done a really good job of demoing on the live instance where we can find some settings, how do we configure. So this sits inside the Marketing Cloud instance itself, just like we navigate to the Journey Builder or any other studio. The Personalization Studio. So can I get confirmation? I see in the chat window that somebody is seeing the blank screen. Can you confirm if you're able to see the... Sorry about the pause. So these are some of the settings that we have seen, and we also looked at the importance of the data set and the relevance of the need for having the data set in the personalization. And we looked at creating of the API tokens. How do we create and what is the purpose of them? And the audit log and the different types of permissions that are available within the personalization. If you want to grant access to somebody, what are the different types of user roles that we can assign? And also these roles can be customized and also new roles can be created. And these are all customized with different permissions under the manage permissions, role permissions. So under this, we have granular level of permissions listed. So we can update these. So let's say we have this campaign approver. For this campaign approver, some set of permissions would be already set in the system. We can go to the system and update these. And we can also create new roles as well. And in the demo, we have seen all the different things. Something which we haven't covered in the last session is creating an SFTP account. So whenever we are sending or receiving data from an external system, we can do that using the SFTP. So any ETL feeds that are coming into the personalization or going out, we can do that through the SFTP. So how do we create the SFTP user? So it's similar to the process that we do in the Marketing Cloud, only that in during the creation process, it's very important that we need to download the CSV file that contains the details of the username and the password. And also we need to make sure that we copy the login URL as well. So if we do not download this CSV file and we do not save these username and password, then the only way to retain them is we have to create a new user. So there is no way that we can get the details again. So it's very important that we download the CSV file and make note of the username and the password. And other important thing to note is for every data set, a new user needs to be created. So if a user has to access different data sets, you have to create the SFTP user for each data set differently, separately. I'll show a quick demo of the SFTP. How do we create? So here under the Manage SFTP configuration, here we have the option to define the LO list, the list of IP addresses that we can allow the connections from. So we can define these LO list, and this LO list has to be, the addresses has to be in the IP4 format and CIDR notation. And when we create the user, we use this create SFTP user, and we give the name to the user, and then select which data set you want to create the user for. And when we create the user, it gives us the option to download the CSV file. So we need to download this and keep it safe so we can gain access to the username and the password. And the URL is going to be this one. We have to use this login URL. And yesterday we also, when in the last session, when we are looking at the trust status, this is where we can check the status of the personalization, Marketing Cloud personalization here. And this is organized by the region and by the instances. So as we see here, we can select this is all the instances that are available. We can also check by the region. And these are the different instances available. In order to know which instance our account belongs to, we can check this one here. This is US6. And also when we browse through different sections of the personalization, the gears or the feeds or some of the sections, in the URL, we get to see this number. So this is the one that we can use to find the status. So here we are, and we can check all the status of this one. So this is all from the last session, which wasn't covered. So before we get started with today's session, before I turn it over to Michelle, so I have a voucher to give away. So for this one, I will post a question, and the first one to answer will be able to get the voucher. And just a note to the people who do not need the voucher, you don't need to answer the question. Only who is looking for a voucher, please answer the question. The question is, what are the 5 different roles, user roles that comes out of the box in the personalization? We can post those questions in the chat. You need to mention all the 5 roles. I think Ashwini mentioned all the 5 roles. Hitesh has mentioned, but one is missing. Ashwini is the first one to answer everything correctly. So Ashwini, please post your email address, I will connect with you to share the voucher information. So going back to this answer, we have this one here. These are the 5 different user roles that comes out of the box: the campaign approver, editor, campaign author, editor with export, and the viewer. So that is all from my end. I will now turn it over to Michelle. Michelle, please take it over.
Great, thanks, JB. Let me share my screen here. So yes, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining the third session where we'll be going over the solution overview. My name is Michelle Medina. I'm a senior consultant at Cervello. We are a Salesforce partner. We have completed a lot of Salesforce engagements, and we have a group within our Salesforce practice that specializes within Marketing Cloud. I've also included my LinkedIn here, so feel free to connect with me there. Like I said, today we'll be going over the solution overview. So what we'll be going over today is, we'll start with a quick high-level overview of the core implementation components, and then really dive deep into the solution setup. As you'll see here, we have a few key components as part of the solution setup, so we'll dive deeper into those as well. Definitely feel free to post any questions through the chat, and we can hopefully get those answered at the end. If not, definitely at our Ask Anything panel as well. All right, so starting with just a course, the standard implementation, and wanted to keep in mind here that what's considered a standard implementation would be usually implementing around 1 to 2 use cases across, again, 1 to 2 channels with 1 domain. So I'll dive deeper into what that means. But so first things first is definitely establishing a realistic timeline. Like I said, a standard implementation takes roughly about 10 weeks, considering those factors that I've just mentioned. And then, you'll have to have a discovery workshop. So really, the purpose of the discovery is to define that architecture and the data model of your MCP instance. So understand how it fits in your current tech stack. Define those use cases that are important to execute. And second piece, and a really important piece to your personalization solution setup, is that sitemap. So, and in our next session, we're actually going to do a deep dive into the sitemap. So definitely join that. But as I mentioned, so the sitemap development. So, developers will build that sitemap so that the beacon is dropped into the header of the site. So with that beacon, with that script, it calls out to the sitemap and it loads it. So this allows Marketing Cloud Personalization to understand all of the areas on your website to where data is captured. So typically, like I mentioned, in a standard implementation, it's suggested to start with 1 domain and then scale. Following the sitemap development, there's our data feeds. So it's, again, recommended to begin implementing 1 to 2 data feeds to meet those key use cases, and then consider implementing more feeds later. So now that we have those data feeds set up, you can begin implementing those key use cases. Like I mentioned, it's recommended to implement, 1 to 2 use cases initially, across web or email, and consider those lower complexity level but high speed to value use cases. And lastly, once the foundation of MCP is set up, you can begin scaling, with more integrations, more use cases, and more channels. So the first piece that we'll be walking through today is the Web SDK deployment. So the Web SDK allows personalization to collect the behavioral data, business context data, and deliver that personalization. So the SDK places a first-party cookie on the visitor's browser, which sends data back to MCP. So you're able to track pages visited, clicks, links clicked, time on site, number of pages, geolocation, and much more of those metrics. So the beacon along with the sitemap allows you to also collect custom data that you want to capture, send decisions and recommendations back to the website for that user to have a personalized experience in real time. There are two web SDK deployment options. So there's the synchronous integration and also an asynchronous integration. The synchronous integration loads the beacon before the rest of the page. And this integration is recommended for the best user experience. It prevents page flicker. And the asynchronous integration option loads the beacon after the page has loaded, which can result in page flicker and in a poor user experience. So I've actually included some helpful resources and links here that would detail more of the web SDK and the integration options as well. And then these screenshots is what you're seeing here is, so if you were to go into your web and go into this JavaScript integration, you would end up at the JavaScript integration page, and you'll see that code that you'll have to copy and paste into the header of your website. And it's recommended to make sure to place it as high as possible to ensure the best user experience. So once we have this web SDK set up and deployed in our website, I wanted to talk about the unified customer profile. We've mentioned it in the past couple of sessions, but wanted to get a bigger understanding, a deeper understanding of what the unified customer profile is, and the important impact it has on other components of the solution. So right here, what you're seeing is a sample of a financial services profile. So you can get to this unified customer profile through the user segments, or you can also search as well. But so this is an example of a known user, Rachel Morris Ebb. And you're able in the beginning at the top, you'll see she's from San Francisco, California. So you're able to understand a high level demographic data. And again, also any historic conversion data there. For this example, she doesn't have any historic conversion data, but you'll see, your lifetime value purchases, your orders, your average order value as well. And then below here, in the timeline, you're able to see all of her digital interactions with the website. So you'll see from August 26th, there was interaction with the website, and then you're able to see that as well along through October. In the overview tab down below, you get a bigger picture and more understanding of her user ID, and you can store those multiple identity attributes, which we'll dive a little bit deeper into today as well, what identity attributes are. But in this profile, you'll see some of those identity attributes are the phone number, the Salesforce contact ID, the email, and in this use case, also an advertising ID. So really any of these IDs can be leveraged when we start thinking about that identity management piece. Essentially, going from an anonymous to a known state, to make sure we have that real-time understanding of who Rachel is as a customer. Then also you'll see down below some attributes. So these attributes are what you're able to set up as well. So these attributes is data brought in from any system. So either if you're capturing data points via JavaScript, if it's available on the website, or via APIs by passing those data values, or also updating them through feeds through the ETL system. So also on the right side here, you'll see you're tracking all of the engagements across digital channels. So you're getting an understanding of what pages Rachel has viewed, any of the products she's looked at, and how they have really, engaged with the site. So all of this information is ultimately rolled up into the understanding of what their interests and affinities are. So you'll see at the top right, this depth of data is captured for both, on the individual level for both known users and unknown visitors. So this data is helpful for, granular segmentation, used for targeting, or will also allow you to, it'll help with making those real-time machine learning driven decisions, about what products or blogs or, contents or offers to actually show to those end users. So from this wheel, there's 4 dimensions that you see, which are entirely configurable, and they're not limited to these 4 dimensions. This is just the ones that were leveraged for this demo here. But what we're looking at these 4 dimensions, you can look at these this data based on clicks and conversion data, along with time spent, like hovering and mouse movements. But again, you're getting this data much faster, which will then help you inform that real-time decisioning. So along with this unified customer profile, you're also able to see not only where Rachel's interests lie, but also, the segment membership. So what segment each user belongs to. You can compare the segments. You can even see the raw event stream data. So these are real-time interactions and engagements that are coming from the site. And you're also able to see affinity details. So you can understand affinity details over time about this individual across any of those dimensions that are mapped within the catalog. And we'll review what a catalog and the structure and the overview of what that is within this presentation as well. So, it's great. You have this great unified customer profile and it isn't expected to go into each profile and look at their engagements and interests on an everyday basis. But it's important to understand this unified customer profile because all of this data is what will be fueling and powering all the segmentation decisions in terms of who you're targeting. It'll be fueling those recommendation algorithms, also what offers or promotions customers might be able to receive, and also, across multiple touch points across different channels like web or email. So again, it is a real-time view that'll help us provide that one-to-one relevance for each individual user that has landed on our website, for example. So this is another unified customer profile. I know we just showed a financial services, but I wanted to also show a retail profile just to show how customizable or configurable MCP can be. And you'll see the dimensions are different here, and they're coming again from that catalog that was built for this instance. So you're able to configure those different attributes as well. So if you see at the bottom, we have birthdays and community member as for some of those attributes that were different than the financial services example we just saw. So now, we've had that understanding of a unified customer profile. Let's jump into the catalog overview and best practices for building and designing your catalog. So first, let's start off with, what is a catalog? So catalog is a collection of organized and related business object data. So it's used to provide a deep understanding of user behavior with relevant business context. So the catalog should reflect the business context for your firm, or if you're implementing MCP, it should be reflect the business context for your clients. So these catalog objects can be, for example, the products that the company sells, content you want people to read, offers or creative that can be personalized. The catalog is greatly leveraged through MCP. So, it's used for personalization campaigns. They leverage the catalog for AI and targeting. You're also able to create those, rich reports and insights by filtering behavioral data with the catalog. So for e-commerce, the concept of catalogs might be a bit more familiar since their merchandising backgrounds make the data organization similar to MCP, but this, for demand gen, finance, or other verticals, there's might be a little bit more of a typically there's more discussion required during the discovery process to figure out the right structure of your catalog. So also included, and you'll see throughout this presentation, some helpful links that dives a bit deeper into each topic or component that we are mentioning here. And then I just wanted to show, what one of those pre-built catalogs will look like in personalization. So here's what a product catalog would look like, and you're able to add attributes and related catalog objects. For this, it is empty, but here you'll see that you can add a new attribute and add a related catalog object as well. So now, when thinking about designing your catalog, there's 4 principles that you should adhere to and consider as you're designing your catalog. So first thing is that your catalog should be actionable. So meaning, it's providing intelligence it provides intelligence, so it allows for more efficient and effective decision making. It should also be scalable. So as your brand evolves over time, ensuring that the MCP data model can keep up with the business requirements without extensive, MCP development or any changes, drastic changes within your MCP. And third, it should be that your catalog should be available. So it should be available in all channels. So for example, if a user is engaging with your mobile app, it should have referential integrity with your website to create that holistic customer experience. So it should be able to tie and personalize within your mobile app and also within your website. And then finally, it should be relevant. So it should be closely tied with the business objectives and those key KPIs. So now that we've, kind of considered, we've seen what a catalog might look like, some of those design considerations and principles you should follow. So, a question that you might be having right now is, so how do you build that catalog? So the catalog can, be built in 2 ways. So the data could be populated in the catalog, so it can be ingested through the sitemap or through catalog feeds using the ETL system. So you'll see here on the left, there's an example of what it would look like within the sitemap, and also on the right here, what it would look like through the ETL system. So keep in mind also that you can use both of these methods in parallel to maintain your catalog as accurately as possible. So now we're really jumping into what are the components of a catalog. So a catalog is comprised of items, or they're also called catalog objects, with associated metadata about those items that are tracked as attributes and dimensions. So each item, as you'll see here, has attributes and dimensions, which essentially describe characteristics of the item. So those catalog objects or items, are the foundation of your catalog. So MCP, like I mentioned, offers those built-in objects with features that essentially uncover most of the most common use cases. So for example, that product's catalog object has built-in attributes for price and list price so that they can be, easily referenced in product recommendations. An important concept to understand is that dimensions, which are those characteristics that describe the business context of items. So they're also items themselves. And I know that can be a little confusing, but what this really means is that they can be referenced the same ways as the pre-built items in MCP. So they can be referenced for AI recommendations, or they can also be used for targeting. And you'll see on the right here some of those item types that, the screenshot I showed you was products, but you'll also have blogs and articles dimensions, as I mentioned, as in items themselves and categories. So these catalog items build affinity. So personalization captures user activity as events. Um, the user interaction with an item builds affinity towards that item and its associated dimensions. So personalization offers some built-in events, excuse me, like views. So views are tracked when a user views a catalog item on your website. So for example, on an e-commerce site, this would mean viewing a product detail page on a given product. For a bank, this could be viewing a blog or an article or a detail page of a certain credit card that the bank offers. And another built-in event is time spent. So this is tracked while a user is viewing a given item and is a strong indicator of intent. So what that means is as a user spends more time viewing a particular item, their affinity for that item and its associated dimensions will grow, and vice versa. So if there's a short amount of time viewing for a specific item, let's say, for example, a user navigates quickly away from a certain page, that will show a negative affinity toward that item and its associated dimensions. Another built-in event is purchase. So purchases, it's a strong indicator of intent. So MCP tracks the specific items bought and builds affinity towards those items, and again, and towards their associated dimensions. Add to cart, it's typically used for e-commerce sites, and it's also a strong indicator of intent, but not as strong as purchases. So MCP, it maintains a shadow cart for each user, so it tracks when items are added or removed from the cart. So this allows you to have a real-time view of what a user has in their cart in any given moment. And then also many sites allow users to add favorites or wish lists, so it's also a built-in event. So we've gone over the catalog items. Let's dive a bit deeper into the catalog attributes. So attributes are associated with specific item types and can be customized to fit the business requirements. They're used in campaigns to reflect data about specific items featured in the campaign. They're heavily used in recommendation campaigns as well to render the product or content recommendation for that user. So in this example that you see on the right here is an example blog post, and each component making up the recommendation is an attribute of the item. So the image, the title, the topic, and the click-through URL are all attributes of this item. So we've gotten a bigger picture of what the catalog structure is. So let's take a look at what a catalog structure could look like for a financial services firm. So this catalog on your left here has products such as mortgages and credit cards that customers can purchase. So these products underneath here, you'll see that they have basic attributes like ID, description, name. They have image URL and URL, but they're also tracking margins. So this is for the business to understand the value of the product. On the right-hand side, you'll see that this catalog also has blogs with similar attributes. But rather than tracking the margin for blogs, they're tracking the blog publish date. So it'll allow them to recommend, for example, the most recently published articles to their customers. And again, this isn't an exhaustive list of attributes, but it's a good example to show how catalogs can have different item types and also different attributes to fit their use cases. So now we'll dive even a deeper, further level into those dimensions. So dimensions are that contextual characteristics of the item that describe how it relates to other items or item types in your catalog. So as a reminder, dimensions are items themselves, but they're different than the pre-built item types like the product and the blogs. So dimensions can be assigned to products and blogs or to each other to describe the context of that item. So there's a special type of dimension, which are called categories, and that allows for a hierarchical level structure. So categories can have parent or child categories, and that allows for more of a further contextual understanding of how those categories relate to each other. Um, One big difference between dimensions and attributes is that dimensions can be shared across item types, where attributes are unique to that item. So products and blogs can both use the same value in the category dimension. For example, if a customer reads a blog article that has a category of running, and there's a product like a woman's running shoe also has the same category of running. So in this example, the user would build affinity towards the category of running by either reading the blog article or viewing the running shoe product. So unlike attributes, users can build affinity toward dimensions. So it's tracked by the catalog events that we reviewed earlier, like the views and the page visits. So this affinity is stored in that customer profile, so that wheel that was holding those dimensions, and that's what's used for recommendations and targeting to, again, provide that relevant user experience. So when figuring out what dimensions you need in your catalog, there's a few things to keep in mind. So dimensions should help provide context or insight into user behavior with your brand. So the data captured for dimensions should be as standardized as possible, since those dimension values serve as their own IDs. So for instance, if you having an uppercase and lowercase version of a dimensional value, that's an example of an unstandardized dimension value. So this can cause unintended consequences for the affinity build and also activation. And also finally, select dimensions that are applicable to a broad portion of your catalog. So a dimension won't likely be helpful with machine learning if the dimension is only applicable to a small portion of your catalog. I think this next example will be helpful to further understand that catalog structure from items, attributes, and dimensions here. So again, we're taking a look back at that FinServe example that we have, where we have products and their attributes. But then the layer after attributes are those dimensions. So for products, we added that contextual information about their major product types. So such as we added the mortgage type, the length of mortgage, or credit card perks. And then for blogs, we added similar contextual information. So we added the authors, we added the content type. So is it an article or is it a white paper? And then dimensions you see in the middle, centered in blue, are shared dimensions. So they bring valuable insights to both the products items and also the blogs item. So now that we have a deeper understanding of a catalog structure, let's take a look at user attributes here. So again, I've added some helpful links that will be linked out to Salesforce documentation that gives you a bit more details into what each component is. So here I've included some screenshots here of the unified customer profile. So on the left, you'll see attributes of each customer. So these user attributes, they can be referenced for segmentation across channels. And if you're using propensity scores, so those can be leveraged for the next best offer and next best action decisioning as well. So on the right-hand side, in terms of attribute customization, you're easily able to create new attributes under the attribute setting. So you'll see here, if you can create a new attribute, the name is the API name. So ensure it's a camel case in a single word. The label is what would will display. So if you didn't want to display, wanted it to be spaced and have, for this, for this example, you'll see advertising space ID. This is what the business end user would see in the unified customer profile, for example. And then type is what defines the type of the attribute. So if it's a string, an integer, a Boolean, or a decimal, you'll be able to define that there. And then the classification override is where you can restrict who can see the attribute and where it can be used. So it could be either sensitive, non-sensitive, or personally identifiable. So depending on permission levels, if users will either see stars for a sensitive or PI attributes or not see them at all. And this will also ensure that these sensitive or PII attributes cannot be rendered in a campaign. In terms of populating these attributes, there's a couple ways you can do that. So first, configuring that site-wide JavaScript. So to capture an event or an action and assign values to that attribute based on certain behaviors. You can also leverage the event API to update a certain attribute in real time. And you can also leverage the ETL system, which we've mentioned, to ingest those attributes, and you can use the user ETL data feed. And wanted to point out here, store attributes that are meaningful for your use case execution. Then if on the right-hand side, this screenshot, if you hover over any of those attributes, you can see the origin of, where that attribute and when it was last updated as well. So for this example, you'll see the advisor agent attribute, it came from the web and also was last updated on August 24th, 2020. So we've gone through user attributes. Another main component of MCP are the identity attributes. So MCP has, an identity system, and it's MCP's method of essentially defining a unique user profile. So as events and interactions are received, the identity attributes that are configured and are received in these events determine whether that event should be assigned to an existing profile or if a new profile should be created. So ultimately, the identity system is a collection of those selected attributes that have been determined to identify an individual. So at the screenshot below, there are 5 pre-built types. So if you're using any of these pre-built identity attributes, it's recommended to use these pre-built attributes and use these default attributes that are already in your MCP instance and not create your own. So in your discovery, it's important to plan for your identity system. So first thing you need to really think through are the sources. So, what activation channels are you looking to enable? Is it to collect and activate on the web or in their email or even bring offline data in? It's important to identify these and identify what identities are available that will cover all of the activation channels for your use case. So after identifying the sources, it's important to understand the relationship between the identities. So for example, if there's a customer ID, it's good to check if there's a customer ID and email address available across all activation channels. You also want to understand if there could be multiple addresses tied to that customer ID. Then you also want to review thoroughly the merge logic documentation. I also have it linked here to understand the implications of adding additional or multiple identities. And it's also important to note that once you've created an attribute, there's no modifications that can occur. So again, it's important that planning is complete before creating new attributes, identity attributes. And likewise, just adding additional identities can cause unintended consequences to merging. So you should like I mentioned earlier, really only track those identities if you have a use case for it and if it has that coverage across the systems and the channels that are required. So we've gone through some of this considerations when planning for your identity attributes. So let's jump to what the identity attribute components are. So if first component is, the uniqueness. So if an identity is not unique, two user profiles can have the same value. It will not be available for looking up and merge. So it won't be considered in the merge logic. And if you're looking to support that merge and search, you'll want the identity to be unique. The second component is case sensitivity. So you can have a value for true or false. False means it doesn't need to have a match on casing to get for a match. And a true value means you will need to have a match on all casing in order to look up and merge. So both of these values do support lookup and merge as well as search within the UI. And then the third component is the attribute data type. So the only supported type for an identity attribute is the string type. And then, once you've configured identity attributes, I just want to jump quickly to personalization. There's a couple further settings that need to take place depending on the activation channels that are required for your use case. So if you're activating on web, so what you'll do quickly here is go to settings, and then you'll see you'll have advanced options. If you scroll down, you'll find selecting the identity attribute for your web SDK identity. So here's where you want to use the most prevalent web ID. So use the primary ID for web events. And then also, if you're using open time email campaigns, you also want to have this checkbox checks as well. So again, using that primary ID. Let me jump back to presentation here. And I know we have around 7 minutes, so I don't think I'll take too much longer, but just want to get through these quickly. Hopefully we have some time for questions after. So what I wanted to run through here are some examples that would cause an event to be matched. So in this example, we have an identity system at the top that has 4 configured identity types. So it has customer ID, email address, phone, and Salesforce Marketing Cloud contact key. On the first box on the left, we have an event coming in with an email address and an existing user with the same email address. Since the emails are matching, this event will be assigned to that existing user. So in the second scenario below, we have an event that came in with 2 identities. So here we have a match on the Salesforce Marketing contact key, but we don't have a match on the email address. So this will still be a match because of the matching contact keys, and this event will be assigned to that user. On the third example on the top right, we have a match based on the email address, but we do not have a match on the customer ID. But because we have a match on the email, this event will be assigned to that existing user. And on the last example, the bottom right, you'll see an event coming in and we don't have a match on the email address, but we do have a match on phone number. However, since the phone number in our identity system is not configured as a unique identity namespace, a match will not be considered here. So the lookup and merge won't be considered, and therefore we don't have that match between this event and that user. So in this use case, a new record will be created. Then also want to run through a couple more complex scenarios where an event can match multiple profiles. So here we still have the same identity system set up. So we have the customer ID, the email, the phone, and the contact key. And on the left-hand side, you'll see an event with an email address and the customer ID populated. The top match you'll see here is matching on the email address, on the Jane Doe email address. And we also have another match on the customer ID for the second existing user with the event. So what this will do is merge both existing users to have one resulting user with the email address and customer ID populated on the resulting user. So if we take a look at the second scenario here, we have an event coming in with an email address and the customer ID. At the top, for the existing user at the top, we have a match on email address. And for the second user, we do not have a match on the email address, but we do have a match on the customer ID. So again, this will result in existing user 1, which is the top one, and existing user 2 merging, as well as all of their historic behavior merging as well. So the resulting user will retain the Jane Doe email because they have the most recent timestamp. And the phone number is populated and retained, and also the customer ID is also populated. So lastly, and this is somewhat of a newer feature, is our profile object setup. And what profile objects are is, they contain this user specific information. The key here is user specific, that you can use. So you can use these profile objects to describe a user's relationship to a catalog object. So you can also associate attributes with these user profile objects. And you can extend profile data storage by configuring these profile objects. So it's what profile objects allow for is to have an increased flexibility to define and customize your MCP data model. So for example here, actually, it has a similar, essentially almost the exact same interface as catalog objects. But in this case, you can name your own profile objects. You can add in attributes for the profile object. So this is where you want to describe that object with some of that user specific information, such as, does this user have auto pay enabled? Is the card active? What's the user's point balance? So all of this data describes an individual user's credit card. So let's say for my example, it's describing my credit card. So it's user specific. So this is why you wouldn't want to store this type of data in the catalog. And that's where you can use these user profile objects. So you can also map these user profile objects to related catalog objects, which you see here at the bottom. It's related to the credit level, banking products, and product type catalog objects. So I know we are at time. I think we have a minute left. JB, I'm not sure if we want to answer questions in the last minute or leave them for the next session or during our panel. Either way, I want to thank everyone for your time. I know it was a lot of information. I'm hoping it was a helpful session.
Well, thanks for a wonderful session, Michelle. It is really helpful. Looking at the questions, we don't have many questions today. And thanks to Jamal for answering the questions in the chat window. So I don't see any other questions. Anybody, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat window. And after the session as well, you can post them on the Slack or on the Ask Me Anything panel form that I will share on the Slack channel. If anybody wants to fill in that form now, let me know. I will share it here. So I see one question. We have a unique tag placed in our website contact us form. In NCP sitemap, what actions needs to be taken? Can we postpone this question to the next day's session? I think this is related to the sitemap. So next session is going to be on the sitemap. So we can look at it in detail in the next session. For the hands-on session for personalization, unfortunately, we cannot, but we will keep that in mind and we will see. But the hands-on sessions are in the plans for the Marketing Cloud features. But for the personalization, that's something which we have to discuss and plan. I will let you know, or you can follow the updates on the LinkedIn or on the group. So if you join the group, you will get automated notifications. So you can check the updates there. But we will keep this in mind. We'll see if we can provide the hands-on for the MCP as well. I think those are the questions. And thank you, everyone. And thank you, Michelle, for a wonderful session. We will be uploading this recording on the YouTube channel, MC Learning Camp. And all the resources, including the slide deck, will be added to the description area of this video. Thank you once again, and we'll see you in the next session. That is on Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern. That will be on Siteman. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Bye-bye.